I am so happy to welcome all of you watching tonight. This, of course, is not how we had planned to honor Andrew Freear, a man for whom the tangible physicality of place and the materiality of built form and direct human relationships are so important. But what this changed occasion does allow us to do is to include many more voices and many more viewers in our celebration of Andrew and his work. We've created a collage of voices and images to tell the story of the remarkable accomplishments that Andrew and the faculty he leads, the students he inspires, and the neighbors and friends who are Rural Studios community partners have all created together. The President's Medal is one of the most important events of the year for the Architectural League. It gives us an opportunity to honor significant figures in architecture and the environment, including in recent years, Darren Walker of the Ford Foundation and climate activist Christiana Figueres. The President's Medal is also an occasion to help build the financial support that makes League programs possible. We're extremely grateful to all who supported the presentation of this year's medal in these extraordinary and challenging circumstances. A number of thank yous for tonight. To Andrew for his unstinting generosity and flexibility in working with us, to Natalie Buttsball of Rural Studio for her help in a million ways, to Timothy Hersley, whose stunning photographs and videos have documented Rural Studio across its entire life, to the creators of the video tributes you will hear tonight, and to our videographer, Nolan Roy, to Britt Cobb and Michael Beirut of Pentagram, and to the Architectural League staff, especially Daniel Joffe, Katie Rotman, and Nanase Shirakawa for their hard work putting tonight together. You'll learn a lot about Rural Studio this evening, but its accomplishments are so deep, so interconnected, and so multiple that a much longer telling is required. The current work lecture by Andrew that we had planned as a part of this celebration will now be presented in 2021, when we can all gather together again in person, and I look forward to welcoming you again then. How did an Englishman from North Yorkshire come to be the director of an American university's residential design build program based in a town of fewer than 200 people in rural West Alabama? One branch of that story begins, of course, with Rural Studio itself, which was founded in 1993. Samuel Mockbee, Sambo, was a remarkable architect originally from Meridian, Mississippi, who believed that all people should be able to benefit from good design. With his friend D.K. Ruth, head of the architecture program at Auburn University, he founded Rural Studio to expand the training of architecture students and to serve the people of West Alabama. Rural Studio's fiercely inventive early projects quickly attracted a great deal of attention. In the meantime, an ocean away, Andrew Freear trained as an architect at Leicester Polytechnic and the Polytechnic of Central London. His work abroad year during his schooling was spent at SOM in Chicago. When he returned to London and enrolled at the Architectural Association, his interests and influences included the great London housing architect Neve Brown and others in the remarkable cohort of post-war British architects committed to public work. Back in Chicago after the AA, working and teaching, he heard a lecture by Sam Mockbee at the Graham Foundation. When Auburn University advertised an open teaching position a bit later, Andrew applied, and his life and Rural Studio's future converged. After teaching for a year in Auburn, Andrew was asked by Sambo if he would come live and teach in Newbern, which he did beginning in the fall of 2000. Samuel Mockbee died of leukemia in December of 2001, a tragic loss for Rural Studio and for architecture. Soon after, Andrew took on the responsibility of shepherding the life and directing the work of Rural Studio, a commitment and challenge he has carried out with passion, wisdom, patience, and brilliance ever since.
Thank you, Rosalie, for both choreographing tonight's celebration and for your crucial role in leading our independent and vital institution at this difficult time in history. It is my distinct pleasure to present the Architectural League's President's Medal to Andrew Freear, who has directed Rural Studio for the past 20 years. Simply put, Rural Studio is the most consequential design-build architecture program in the country, and testament to this are the over 200 buildings they have realized within a 25-mile radius in Newbern, Alabama, making Hale County possess one of the highest concentrations of carefully designed places in direct collaboration with its community in rural America. Just as significantly, there are over 1,000 students who have been educated through Rural Studio's unique curriculum of ethically motivated, direct engagement with a complex act of building. Andrew has transformed what matters in architecture and architectural education through the agency of design and action to discern what should be built rather than what can be built. The sheer volume of this work, its benefits to the under-resourced community, and the years of commitment to an exhausting, labor-intensive model of architectural education, which has had transformative impacts on students and on those students, is itself reason to celebrate Andrew Freear. But what is more impressive is perhaps what is less obvious. In 2 decades, Andrew has evolved what Rural Studio does by asking the difficult questions about the complex consequences of architecture, both as a critique of past habits, but more importantly, as a means towards new forms of action. He reveals invisible links between seemingly disparate things, between, say, insurance rates and the need for a local fire station to heat water tanks, between an affordable 30-year mortgage and the height of a house ideal for natural ventilation, between undervalued forest thinnings and idiosyncratic saddlebag structures. In optimistically exploring these thickets of consequences, he stakes out new territory for architecture, what it can and what it should do. This can be seen in 4 areas. First, Andrew has shifted Rural Studio from more singular buildings to multi-year, larger civic projects that transform over their sometimes decade of design and realization, precisely so that the consequences of each stage informs the next. In immersing himself through time into the trust of the community, he knows these consequences, good and bad, of what has been done and what should be done next. Second, the 20K House and the Front Porch Initiative were specific architectural and economic responses to systemic poverty and the detrimental effects of mobile homes. The 20K House's design ingenuity is not just in the elegant, efficient, affordable homes, but in the delivery process that supports a local industry of home building with the consequence of real property with a real title and real equity, all of which are absent in manufactured homes. Third, Andrew's critique of habits has focused on why we build with walls and multiple cheap layers, many of which are made from petroleum products. Rural Studio is now developing research into mass wood assemblies with direct consequences on performance, aesthetics, assembly, the local wood economy, and the global question of carbon sequestering. Fourth, Rural Studio's farm radically changes the relationship between a school and its land. Complete with experimental greenhouse and calibrated crop cycles, the farm produces over 5,000 pounds of vegetables a year. This provides a viable working alternative to the processed food industry and its effects on obesity and health. Students work the farm as part of their daily routine, part of their design education, seeing and tasting the consequences of, say, an organic carrot. Under Andrew's leadership, Rural Studio deeply embeds itself in the complex consequences of building, architecture, community, and place, and in so doing has transformed the education of an architect into the education of a citizen architect, where design is inextricable from its ethical, economic, and environmental consequences. It is our pleasure tonight to present some of those consequential impacts in 4 chapters entitled Citizen Architect, Houses, In This Place, and Going Forward.
I'm from Kuwait, and the way I ended up here, I was actually at Arizona State, and they had a Good Intentions sort of lecture series, and Design for Humanity was there, and Auburn Rural Studio, and Andrew Freear was there. And Andrew Freear was so inspiring, I remember in that lecture, that the next day I asked for transfer papers and transferred to Auburn.
Rural Studio lends a strength you never expected, but somehow you get to keep. It's the experience that makes all other learning curves seem not nearly quite as steep. It's the voice in your head telling you to speak truth to power and to pick fights with mediocrity, self-doubt, and fear. It's the extended family you never knew you had, who will always be right here. It's the best of times during the worst of times. And throughout all this other stuff, Rules Studio has been the teacher that we never thank enough. Congratulations, Andrew, and thank you for being a part of replenishing what students can always take away from Rules Studio.
So the Rules Studio really changed the entire trajectory of my life. It made me want to continue to wrestle with the big questions and the deep societal problems. It set the bar really high for finding work that would engage my mind and my heart at the same time. And it also gave me a really deep sense of place. So even though I was, I grew up in Alabama and I am from here, I just had never experienced both the cancers and the magic and luminosity of my home state until I went to the Rural Studio. And it's sort of kind of strange and crazy that all of this happens under the tutelage of this wild-haired, irreverent, big-hearted, big-souled Yorkshireman. And I think it's really one of Andrew's great gifts that he's able to help students cut through the BS and just sort of separate what's important from what isn't important and really help them to see who they were born to be.
Just asking the question, what matters in architecture, is special. Is it the joy of making something or the excitement of making it happen? Is it the satisfaction of knowing that your work has some social benefit to others? Or is it the pursuit of the poetic response to something that might otherwise be purely ordinary? All of these questions are asked at the Rural Studio, and all students and faculty, anyone associated, has the opportunity and is forced to answer those questions. That is really special.
Hello, dear Andrew Freear. I am so happy that you are being awarded this evening. It is a much-deserved tribute to your work. And I just wanted to say that what I think the Rural Studio has shown is that it's not designing against the blank canvas that is the most challenging design education, but rather designing for real people who are living under the weight of history and the very real constraints of poverty in a real place. That is the most impactful, rigorous, and joyful design education that a student could get, and is the kind of design education the next generation of architects need. So congratulations to you. I have a deep, deep respect for you and your work.
In Alabama, around 19% of people live below the poverty line. In Hill County, nearly 28%. 35% of people here live in mobile homes. A mobile home is the housing option with the least upfront cost, asserting itself as the new vernacular. A contrast to an older residential typology, the antebellum house, the pre-Civil War home in the South. One is crafted from timber and other local materials. The other is built far away, its dollars for materials and labor going into pockets outside of the community. One is formed based on principles of passive heating and cooling, taking advantage of natural systems. The other's shape is based on dimensions that allow it to be hauled down the road. Among the design features of one is the front porch, an important cultural component in the South. The other is a rectangular box that lacks the defining elements that make a Southern home. It can be located anywhere. This house is financed like an automobile. Because of high interest rates, buyers spend more than face value. Over time, it depreciates. The other does not offer the same low upfront cost or fast turnaround, but lasts because it's built well and is designed in response to a place. The 20K home is an annual project at Rural Studio. Its objective is to create a home that is affordable to all, a new typology that makes sense for Hale County and benefits the community. The price tag for which the $20K home is named is derived from the biggest mortgage someone receiving a median Social Security check can realistically pay. The goal is to build the home quickly, but well in 3 to 4 weeks, producing an economic engine by which a builder and 3 local workers can profit. Its design is based on principles learned from the vernacular architecture of Alabama. Each year begins with a critique of the previous year's homes to understand which aspects did and did not work. Part design project, part research and development lab, the 20K home aims to provide beautiful, good quality, economically viable homes for all. A line of products that can be produced and ultimately distributed open source to local contractors to create affordable housing that works for Hale County and the southern region. Built in the community, by the community, for the community.
This song goes out to the memory of Lou's at a place called Flava and to GB's Mercantile. And also to Andrew Freear, congratulations on being knighted. Fry my okra, sweet in my tea, candy my yams, black out my beef, corn my bread, won't you color my green, green fry my tomatoes and red velvet my cake, and pecan my pie, and hamburger my steak, burn my food, I'll make it taste real good, and burn my food, it's a delight, a meat and 3 for me, womp, womp, gas from a Chevrolet, oh how I love you my country cafe, you spell country with a K. Congrats, Andrew.
The home base of Rural Studio is Newbern, a rural community of 186 people in Hale County, Alabama. The nearest big city and airport is 2.5 hours away. Main Street is the home of 3 important but struggling community institutions. The Mercantile, the nearest store and gas station for 10 miles. The post office, whose counter times have recently been reduced to 4 inconvenient hours a day. And the Red Barn, which houses Rural Studio. Before 2004, what might seem like a basic civic institution, a fire station, was missing in Newbern and all of South Hale County. Fire crew response times from the nearest station in North Hale and neighboring Perry County were slow. The effect was on home insurance rates. Insurance companies started to sell policies at rates homeowners simply could not afford. This hit people hard in the pocketbook. The response from locals to the prohibitive cost of homeowners insurance was to form a volunteer fire department. Grants for trucks were available. What was needed was a space to house them. A fire station. A group of 4 Rural Studio students designed and built the project in 2 years, and with the community, instigated raising over $100,000 in material and donations. Newbern's first public building in 110 years, fitting the pattern of tightly packed, narrow, street-facing buildings, providing a home for the newly donated trucks. Rural areas don't have fire hydrants, so the pumper fire trucks carry water. To prevent the water from freezing, the trucks require year-round storage at a specific temperature. The firehouse is naturally heated and cooled, like a big barn, indirectly helping to offset operating cost. But perhaps just as importantly, the firehouse started to become a civic center. Newbern needed a community meeting space to foster democracy, a place devoted to public use, a town hall. Built and designed by a second team of Rural Studio students, is positioned immediately to the north of the fire station and takes cues from the local vernacular architecture. The project allows rigorous experimentation with a single local material, cypress. All the design details responded to the performance qualities of the wood, including that over time it will expand and contract up to 3 inches. Windows and doors placed inside or outside allow the wood to contract without the glazing units being compressed or damaged. Together with its barbecue pit and the neighboring firehouse, the town hall creates a street-facing courtyard, a new outdoor space for the community. The creation of the town hall meant that the old bank building, which once served as the polling station and town council chamber, was now vacant. This provided the opportunity to accommodate another missing staple: access to the internet. Access to knowledge, opportunity, and possibly jobs. A space for tutoring and after-school studies. The town library. A place whose renovations preserve the memories of the historic bank building, but whose inside provide opportunities for the future of Newbern and its 186 residents. The addition of these civic institutions has helped turn what might have seemed like an unarticulated downtown along Highway 61 into an increasingly cohesive place for the Newbern community.
I am always inspired, my life is enriched by all that Andrew and his students do and give to our community and our county and to my husband and I in our lives.
Auburn University Studio has impacted every community in Hale County. To name a few, it has provided student resources such as a librarian, housing for family in need, safety resources such as a fire station, and fun outdoors activities such as parks. These all improve the well-being of the youth, adults, and the city citizens in this area. On the behalf of the citizens of Hale County, I truly thank each individual involved in these efforts.
A handful of civic groups that owned, organized, and maintained the largest park in Hale County approached Rural Studio. Lions Park was 40 acres of failed industrial park, with improvised ball fields and rundown facilities. Yet as one of the rare places in Greensboro where the disparate communities had spontaneously integrated, Lions Park was remarkable. How we could try to help was to support this positive integration, encouraging it to thrive. Starting with a grant from Baseball for Tomorrow, 6 ball fields were constructed in a hub-and-spoke configuration, so parents could watch their kids play on different fields at the same time. This evolved into the creation of restrooms, which use captured rainwater to flush the toilets. New entrances and surface treatment to strengthen the park's identity. A concession stand to support the baseball, pee-wee football, and rodeo events. A skate park funded by a $25,000 grant from skating legend Tony Hawk. An adventure playground of mounded dirt and repurposed galvanized drums, which previously carried mint oil across the USA, and which would otherwise only be used once and destroyed. A new home for the Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts of Greensboro, which makes good use out of undervalued small-diameter timbers. Landscaping with native plants and sculpted mounds that manages rainwater runoff and minimizes maintenance. A fitness park that allows the community free outdoor use of aerobic equipment. The entire project has been one of bite-sized chunks over the course of 10 years, buildable by small groups of students at a time. The flexible strategic plan has meant learning as we go, instead of having a fixed master plan expected to solve all problems from day one. It has also meant each phase learns from the others, the opportunity to self-critique, correct, and learn from mistakes. Each small, affordable battle that becomes a victory is at a scale that locals can learn to manage over time. We recently met with the committee that oversees the park. 10 years on, the 20 representatives from the original instigating group are still talking about and dreaming about how to improve their park and ensure its positive presence in the future of Greensboro.
I met Andrew soon after I moved to Greensboro with Alabama Power. As I became involved with various organizations and community activities, I noticed a common theme. Andrew and the students of Rural Studio were always in attendance. Initially, this seemed a little odd, but I quickly realized that the Rural Studio was not just about architecture in a rural part of Alabama. As our partnership between Alabama Power and Rural Studio developed, I found myself learning so much from Andrew and the students. Andrew leads by example. He makes sure projects are carefully thought out and planned in a way that truly enhances the quality of life here. He maintains trust by staying involved in projects even after they're finished. He is well respected and continues to be an active part of our community. Andrew and the Rural Studio have made Hale County a better place. The legacies the students leave will always be remembered and greatly appreciated. Andrew, thank you for all that you do. Hale County is proud to have you as a part of our community. Congratulations.
The Rural Studio Farm is a step towards a more holistic, resourceful, and self-efficient future for ourselves and our community. A self-efficient system differs from a self-sufficient system. While it does produce what it needs, it is also tied to and open to its surroundings. The farm is a soil project. Farmers here call the soil an underground economy. We rely heavily on composting, and we utilize the cultivation strategy of companion plants, which assist one another's growth and replenish nutrients in the depleted soil. The farm is a design project in which Rural Studio students have designed and built a horticulture garden, commercial kitchen, a gravity-fed irrigation system, and a storehouse. The farm is also a teaching project, a laboratory. The strategies we've tested and adopted can be borrowed and applied by others, from a residential scale to the scale of a small farm. The farm is also an economic project. For the city of Greensboro, about 10 miles from the Rural Studio Farm, we designed and built stands and created a graphic identity to support the local farmers market. The only land available for the market does not allow permanent structures, so the stands were designed with dimensions that allow them to be moved without a transportation permit. The stands provide a place to support local growers as well as consumers, and have an easily replicable, open-source design. The Rural Studio Farm articulates how we envision our students and community should live. Based on renewable and passive strategies, the Rural Studio Farm is resourceful, sustainable, self-efficient, and open to the surrounding community, county, and region.
The Rural Studio is particular to its place, its climate, and its people. The Rural Studio can't be reproduced somewhere else. It's unique. But seeing the Rural Studio, we're inspired to make the place we live in better. The Rural Studio makes us want to live simpler and more truthful lives, to perform simple acts of kindness that repair the world, to act more like we want to act, to be more like ourselves.
In the book entitled Rural Studio at 20, which was published about 5 years ago, the 20K house, the use of forest thinnings, the farm, and the farmer's market were all identified as the future direction of Rural Studio. They are now fully integrated in their educational ecosystem, and this rapid evolution is pretty amazing. But what comes next is perhaps even more intriguing. Expanding upon Mockbee's alchemical approach to undervalued materials, Rural Studio under Andrew has developed a collection of ruthlessly pragmatic and yet extraordinary buildings, based upon local, renewable wood, often cut to sizes capable of being lifted by students. From the lamella structure used in the Hale County Animal Shelter and the Akron Boys and Girls Club, to the big shoulders column/trusses of the Newbern Firehouse, to the solid walls of 8x8 cypress timbers stacked 11 feet high of the Newbern Town Hall. This mono-material wall, and again, there's no drywall, no cladding, no added insulation to the wall, coupled with Andrew's anxiety about what he calls the layer cake problem of conventional wall assemblies, where ideas are too constrained by the product lines of the construction industry. This is the basis of Rural Studio's Master of Architecture research into a mass timber breathing wall. Working in collaboration with Salman Craig and Keel Mo at McGill University, students have built an array of full-scale prototypes to test the counterintuitive idea that a single material drilled with strategically placed holes can achieve better thermal performance through mass, heat transfer, and buoyancy ventilation. The architectural, material, and carbon consequences are profound and will likely change how Rural Studio itself builds. Reflecting its nimbleness and creative agility, Rural Studio continues to evolve, transforming itself while transforming its community. Yet its ethos, Andrew's advocacy for the value and the beauty of holistic rural life, the mission to educate citizen architects, remains unchanged.
The Rural Studio reminds us about what actually matters in architectural education through its mission of producing citizen architects that take the social and physical reality of architecture seriously in ways that no other school does or can do. With huge respect and admiration, Andrew, congratulations.
Andrew, congratulations. The impact that the Rural Studio has had upon Hell County is that you have brought architecture to the community and the community to architecture. Thank you for your efforts.
Andrew, sorry to say, mate, we don't think the Rural Studio has changed what matters in architecture. It has, more importantly, shone a light on what has always mattered.
First principles approach to architecture, to education, people, materials, and place, and demonstrated how powerful, beautiful, and kind architecture can be. Thank you, Rural Studio, and congratulations, Andrew and your team.
Congratulations.
Rural Studio has put Newbern on the map. We're no longer just a little town between Greensboro and Uniontown. We're the home of Auburn's Rural Studio. We are so proud that they are sharing their dreams and ideas with us. We have a beautiful town hall, fire station, our library, and many beautiful homes for our residents. So Newbern is very proud of Auburn's Rural Studio, and we are very proud of Andrew. Thank you.
20 years ago, Doctors Without Borders received the Nobel Peace Prize. Rural Studio is one of the few parallels in the field of architecture. Their influence has been like a shadow, or the ripple of a pebble thrown into the Black Warrior River. It extends out to where they've never been. Through hands-on work in response to real-world needs, Andrew Freear has emerged as one of the wise old sages of the profession. Congratulations, Andrew, on the President's Award.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful to hear these voices. And Andrew has always emphasized that the Rural Studio is the team, the collective, the community. And indeed, Rural Studio's impact can be marked by the diversity and quantity of its visitors. Students, architects, people of every persuasion return to Rural Studio over and over again. And one of the two of the frequent interlocutors are architects Billie Tsien and Marlon Blackwell. And we are very pleased to have them join tonight to share their thoughts about Rural Studio and engage Andrew in a discussion. Please welcome Billie, Marlon, and Andrew.
Thank you, Paul.
Hello.
Hey, there's no one listening now.
Good, it's just the three of us, that's the best.
Three of us, so you can cut the bullshit. Stop saying nice things. It's annoying.
Well, I'm supposed to start off with a little personal sort of recollection and thinking about our relationship with the Rural Studio. So it's hard not to recognize that this is a truly angry and heartbreaking time in this country. And I look for solace. And for me, that always has to do with the generosity of shared food. So it's not surprising when I think of the time that Todd and I have spent at the Rural Studio, it often centers on meal. It gives me the opportunity to recognize Elena Bartel, whose spirit is expressed in all the food that is produced and eaten. But our visits to the Rural Studio have often coincided with these giant, crazy production of meals for the students and for the community of Newbern. So we join a parade of trucks led by a rolling barbecue, or as an image from the video, we are tasked with cutting up a huge mountain of kale and then stirring it in this crazy cauldron. This all has to do with nourishing a community and maintaining a delicate web of trust, which is a reminder that sometimes a giant tray of crawfish is as important as architecture. Marlon.
Yes, well, Andrew, you know, I've been coming for the last 20 plus years, first with Sambo and then of course now with you. And I have to say, I always come away after a visit to Newbern so stoked about design and students and our purpose as a profession. And there's always good laughs, great discussion, and awesome food, as Billy has said. Thank you, Elena. What more can you say, Julie? And I'm always excited because I usually come on Halloween reviews, and I'm always in great anticipation to see what Andrew is going to dress up as we do reviews in costume. You know, a nun, Barney Rubble, even a searing, goofing version of our current leader. It's always a hoot, and I realize that there is often more surreal within the real than the surreal. So, Andrew, I'd just like to say it's an honor to be here with you today. And it's been an honor and privilege for the last 20 years to know you as a friend, a colleague, a mentor, and a leader, guided by values and principles that you can trust in. Your humility and single-mindedness of purpose in guiding the Rural Studio to new heights and new innovative possibilities that address beauty and justice for all is what we need in architecture now and always. Your truth to education and the discipline gives me great hope for the future. Truth, hope, humility are the qualities that define you and I believe make you so deserving for this 2020 President's Medal. So, thank you. Billy, I'm going to hand it over to you. I think we've got a few questions you might like to ask Andrew.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
The first question is really about your community work. And you know, it's funny. So I can blame this on Karen Stein, who I know is there, but she's sort of put me onto this thing called Spelling Bee, which is a sort of game that you do at the New York Times, and you get a certain number of letters, and then you have to rearrange them and see how many words you can get. So I was looking at community, and I realized if I were doing the Spelling Bee, I could also do continuity. And I think that they have a lot to do with the work that you're doing, that the Rural Studio has been doing in Newbern. I think the early work was very much more of a kind of singular element. And I think the later work, and in fact it was discussed in the film, is much more about the weaving together of a community and about creating continuity. So I wonder, Andrew, what do you think architecture can create a space for community, a community in a way that bridges both racial and social divides?
Well, I think obviously we're we're very proud of our community projects. I think the first projects came along as tentative requests. There was never really a grand plan, I don't think, to do community projects. I think when I showed up in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I literally coincided with my arrival, and there were these requests. And I think honestly, after Sambo died, for 4 or 5 years, our continued existence was I think we felt it fairly precarious. So I don't think we felt we were able to plan particularly or foresee particularly into the future. We started with pavilions and chapels and small parks, and then we went on by fixing or recycling buildings, buildings I think often others would tear down. Rural Heritage Centre, Akron Senior Centre are 2 examples. And I think in a place where the pace of change is slow, losing a familiar structure is really tough. So the kind of collective memory embodied in buildings is really important for us. But I think probably around 2005, 2006, I think we realized we were sort of here to stay. And as an organization, I think we had learnt about the place. We felt somewhat entrenched, and I think we felt as if we could plan. And at that point, we started to take on larger projects. And obviously, when you take on a larger project, you kind of got to draw more. You got to get more serious. And I think it actually coincided with the Lions Park project and that agreement, which was an amazing kind of multi-year project. Where I don't think we ever imagined that it would go on for 10 years. But I think, when the kind of the stitching the fabric, which I think I'm most proud of, began when we started to work in downtown. So I mean, you've seen, for example, in Newbern, the firehouse, I think one of my favorite recollections of doing the firehouse is we really felt that it should be a long, narrow building, that it should be pushed up to the street front. And we were trying to match the pattern of the opposite street facade in Newbern, and try to kind of suggest to people what it was that they liked about downtown Newbern. And I was really worried that the kind of fire department were going to reject this idea, because typically rural fire stations are very they're quite suburban. They always want to push them back. They don't really celebrate them. And in the meeting with them, we shared a photograph of downtown and showed that actually where the firehouse sits, there was a beautiful old hotel. And we began to suggest to them this is what they actually liked about downtown Newbern. And there was no argument about it whatsoever. So it was a real shock. So I think I've enjoyed the stitching. I've enjoyed the kind of the continuity of the projects. I think to answer your question, I'm not certain if space and architecture can bridge racial and social divides. It can certainly help, but I think there has to be a desire for that bridge. I mean, all of our community projects come from requests. So there is a desire. I mean, the best ones, like the library project in downtown Newbern, that was a very, very gradual process. For 10 years, quite frankly, Frances Sullivan dogged me about that project and was like a bulldog on it. And so it was a really a slow and fermenting process, but she was able to gather a group of folks together really begin to make a solid foundation for the project. So I think, you know, for me, if there is a desire from within, that's you know, you can, but it has to come from within. And we're not an organization that forces folks into a position that you got to take this project, right? This is what we think you should have. We're not interested in telling folks how they should live their lives. I think for me, I'm really proud of the Newbern Library at the moment, because it started out as a very serious library with a very serious focus on learning, bringing internet to the community. And it's because it's got a solid foundation now, it's actually been able to change its mission statement and is becoming much more of a community center. So it's evolved itself. Long answer to a short question, Billy, sorry. Did I?
I think so, but I think there's what you provide or have provided in all the projects that are highly public in nature is they're imbued with a fundamental civic dignity in the way that they are conceived, in the way that they are made, and the fidelity to craft and thought that each of the projects come with, that I think anyone, architect or not, can feel and sense. Right. And I think that too acts as a kind of bridge, right, between aspirations and between everyday life. Right. So I think in some ways you're providing those bridges.
Right.
Well, I think what was striking to me actually was looking at the historical photographs of running through Newbern and realizing that you were really replacing the missing teeth of the town.
Right.
As I mentioned, I've been a willing participant in the annual Halloween reviews, and always in costume or at least in spirit. And I've witnessed, you know, the early years of the 20K house program. Primarily, it's focused on unobtrusive alternative housing models that, you know, they fall outside the conventional housing market, things that aren't being served by that. And it, you know, was always, I believe, intended to create a kind of value proposition for those that were underserved, and certainly for the community or the local economy.
Right.
I think what was laudable was its focus on affordability, spatial efficiency, and of course, a typological familiarity. And it's now begun, I see, to transform into a focus on a much more sophisticated delivery system for these homes, as well as a focus on resiliency and performative, material-based, you know, research-based design. And I dare I say, with an ambition to be innovative and not just really instrumental. So I'd kind of like you to expound upon what's motivating this transformation, because that's clearly a new direction for this program.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think in 2017 we were 12 years into the 20K, and I think as a team we were a little bit frustrated that we weren't actually getting anywhere with the project. You know, we had this goal of releasing the homes and letting them be built by others, becoming an economic engine, bettering rural housing. And we'd done countless local prototypes, and we desperately needed more feedback from clients, housing providers, and builders. And we always wanted the project to be more than just a convenient student building project. And I think, you know, at times we felt that we didn't want to just be a bunch of academics messing around in the woods. And 3 years ago, Fannie Mae showed up in Hale County, and they brought all their chiefs. I mean, I actually still can't believe that they all came. They brought all of their chief operating officers, and they were actually looking for rural housing products for their mortgages. And apparently we were one of the few shows in town. a little undergraduate program of architecture in the middle of West Alabama. So I don't know whether to laugh or cry at the fact that they came to us. And then since then, Fannie Mae it's been the catalyst and connective tissue for a range of collaborations, including rural development, Wells Fargo, Housing Action Council, and the Harvard Joint Center for Housing. And in that process of collaboration, we've actually started to realize that our little houses were a Trojan horse for countless other issues. In this process, we changed the delivery name to Front Porch Initiative, because the 20K actually originated as a kind of nickname in the studio. So there was a problem with the name, because we, over the last few years, almost had to start the conversation by saying, well, actually, we can't do it for $20,000. So we liked the idea of Front Porch, the kind of social implications of that. But during that process, we did start to look at, at the delivery system, and in particular the building performance. And that, now the sales pitch is that if you can guarantee to reduce the second costs, heating bills, etc., for every dollar added to the mortgage, you can get $200 worth of construction. So for example, if a homeowner reduces their energy bill by $25 per month, and instead adds that $25 to their mortgage payment, they can now afford an additional $5,000 in energy efficient construction. So then there'll be no increase in their total monthly outlay. So I think for us to have that opportunity to roll this thing out, to get feedback from these test partners, and today I can sit here and say that it's an unbelievable position for us to be in. We've actually got 5 field test partners across 5 southern states. And through these partnerships, we're going to get some feedback and inform the design laboratory of the studio itself. Rusty actually asked me 3 years ago, do we want to put our heads above the radar and go for this and take a risk? Because we might actually realize that we can't do it. And I think for us, it was sort of better to maybe fail, and not try it all, than not try it all. And I think that's, I hope that's a rural studio lesson, that, we're trying with this thing and we may fail. But I think it's also become a model for our research, whether it's for the farm or the building performance research. We think architects have to take a position, be producers and contributors of knowledge, not just recipients of products. I stumped you there, Marlon.
No, I know it's a good answer. It sounds like you're not willing to be somewhat complacent with the model. In other words, the sort of circular logic of informing what came before informs what comes after, but you're really looking to be much more progressive in thinking about the future, and in many ways, how this program continues to evolve, rather than being something compartmentalized, a closed loop, so to speak. So
right.
I really appreciate the open loopness of it, because it's beginning to manifest itself in a variety of ways and a variety of different scales. I think that are going to be very important to its ongoing success. So,
well, I think I kind of have to pinch myself that 15 years ago we did. Our dream was to have some impact with this thing, and to get some feedback, and we're actually finally in the position to start to really do that. And rather than because as academics we can kind of kick the question around. And I'm excited to see where it goes, quite honestly. So.
It leads to a larger question I know that Billie's wanting to ask. So,
right.
Billie, want to dive in on that?
I will dive in, but I don't know how fast I should be swimming, because I think we're getting close to the end of time. But you know, as an educator and as an architect, what do you think are the greatest challenges for both architects and also, you know, educators? And what do you think the legacy of the Rural Studio will be? What do you hope it will be?
Wow. I mean, I think at the moment, obviously the biggest challenge facing us in the world at the moment is the unknown, with, you know, with all the fear, the civil unrest and sickness, and perhaps that's, you know, that's a question for another day. I think before this all came along, I always felt the biggest challenge for architecture today was the kind of placelessness I see in contemporary architecture. And I kind of feel for students in this moment. I think architecture's been a bit lost, where, you know, an opera house in Florence may look the same as the one in New York City. And I don't really think a 20K house should look the same in New York City as it looks in Hale County. So I think it's likely a problem of globalization, or the incredible opportunity that technology offers, that we can do anything anywhere. But I think if you can do anything, how do you decide what to do, right? So my question to the studio is not what we can do, but what should we do? And I think, you know, people love to eat great food in Italy. The ingredients around you and their production and quality is reflected in the landscape and the buildings. And I think, you know, globally we have a bunch of similar problems to deal with, and I think that we'd like to argue that we should try to solve those problems with local at hand solutions. So, and I think it adds character, authenticity, and gives place its identity. So I think, you know, I like to be a champion for the local.
Do you want to leave a legacy for the future?
Say that again, Billy.
I said, do you want to leave the legacy for the future?
Well, you can. What? You know, I hope we're a champion of the rural and of the local. I mean, I would like to think that the rural challenges are as interesting in as the urban challenges. And I think that these challenges deserve everybody's attention. I hope the rural isn't just seen as an extraction landscape, but as a place of opportunity and potential like we've seen it. And you know, I'm happy to call a place like Newbern my home, because I love its lack of pretension and its grittiness. It's a real place, you know. I find it completely and totally authentic. So I'm very happy to bring students into a place like this and challenge their preconceptions. I think people and place really matter. That, I hope, would be my message.
Just to end on perhaps maybe a little lighter note, we'll see, we'll find out. But so, I mean, you know, you have been living and working in the relative remoteness of Hale County for, you know, the last 20 years, and like you said, you call it home. Well, I got to ask, you know, what is your greatest extravagance, guilty pleasure, living out in Hale County?
Oh, you know, I think, in all honesty, I mean, you all know this. I think every summer, and I'm gonna sound really boring here, but I think every summer.
Don't do that.
I love to take the 6 weeks and go visit my family in Florence, Italy. So the Rural Studio is a very intense place, and to be able to take a break in a place like Florence, Italy, to recharge my batteries is a fantastic thing. I do have to confess. So I mean, that's a kind of a requited guilty pleasure. I have, you know, there's another requited guilty pleasure, which I think I'm actually I'm quite shy and quite somebody that enjoys my own company. So I actually enjoy the solitude. I like to be alone in Newbern, and so that's in some respects another guilty pleasure of living in a place like that. I think the other truth of the matter is that the unrequited guilty pleasure is that I work in this organization where I can be an architect, a builder, a teacher, and an activist. And you know, honestly, I get really frustrated that I can't build more. You know, being the boss, I have to do a bunch of other things. But you know, when Sambo passed in 2001, just in 2001, 2002, I'd actually go to all the project sites and I'd build for a day. And I think for me, I wish I could get back to being that way.
I want to thank Marlon and Billie, and I get the pleasure now of actually reading the President's Medal citation, which actually, and there is a President's Medal. So through his almost 2 decades of leadership at Auburn's Rural Studio, Andrew Freear has created a complex and challenging understanding of what architecture can be and can do. Rural Studio engages some of the most difficult questions in our society: systemic racism, poverty, the degradation of the rural landscape, and shows how architecture can be an instrument of care, bringing together science, technology, craft, and art to support and give better form to our common humanity. Andrew Freear challenges students to contribute to a better society by creating truly exceptional buildings and places in deep collaboration with the diverse local community. Through its civic projects, new approaches to housing, restorative food systems, and material research, Rural Studio has become an exemplary model of architectural education. It defines through its work what every architect and every citizen must embrace: the ethical responsibility for the social, political, and environmental consequences of their actions in the world. So now I get to magically, and by the way, this is where we all go, so I now get to magically, through the kind of joy of, you know, wait, am I going the right way? So hand you the medal and ask you, Andrew, if you'd be willing to make a couple of comments. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Paul. Obviously, I have many people to acknowledge. This is probably going to sound like the Oscars, and Paul, you're going to have to drag me off. First, of course, I'd like to thank the Architectural League. I absolutely love the fact that a small rural southern organization like ours is getting an award from you most urban of Yankees. It truly makes it extra special. All kidding aside, it's a great honor to get such an endorsement from an organization whose mission I admire so much. An organization that's not associated with a professional body of architects, but it's an independent champion of architecture, the public realm, and authentic discourse. I hope tonight I didn't ruin y'all's reputation for genuine discussion. I don't really know of an organization like yours anywhere in the world, perhaps the Architecture Foundation in London. But to yours credit, the spread of your embrace, reach, and influence is much broader, certainly broader than your name implies. So please, please, please keep up the great work. I've always been a great admirer of the League, and they've supported the studio as it has evolved. I've been invited on a number of occasions over the years to give talks. I remember the first time I spoke was about a month after Samuel Mockbey's death. He'd been invited to speak, and after such much consideration, I went in his place to talk at the Cooper Union. I always remember that talk because by the end of it, I was blubbing like a baby. I think I was still in shock at his passing. I also remember in the morning, before getting the plane, buying an early breakfast at Mustang Oil in Greensboro for $1.50, and then getting to New York City and lunch costing me $40 or something like that. I was just shocked. And then what it made it even worse was you all put me in a Philip Stark hotel. I think it was the W. It was one of the first boutique hotels. And I remember being baffled by the toilet. I couldn't figure out how to flush it. In the end, I actually had to go and ask the concierge. And at that moment, I truly felt like such a country bumpkin. Of course, it's particularly special to get this award given the previous recipients. I mean, wow, huh? From Darren Walker, Christiana Figueres, His Highness the Aga Khan, Michael Bloomberg, Kenneth Frampton, Renzo Piano, Amanda Burden, and Richard Serra, to name but a few. I mean, these folks have really actually done some shit. I have to confess that after Paul called me up and told me about the award, I checked that list and I couldn't believe it. I felt then, and I still feel, such an interloper in that group. I also wondered if it was a ruse. So I sent Paul an email and asked him to check if he had got the right Andrew. And I told him he had the weekend to reconsider his decision. Anyway, I'm glad he didn't change his mind, and here we are. So back to that list and that guy, Kenneth Frampton. I hope you architects out there know his Critical History of Modern Architecture. It was actually my first book at architecture school. Being from Yorkshire in the north of England, talk about country bumpkin. Yorkshire's much more Hale County than New York City. And I truly didn't know anything about modern architecture, and that book was my first introduction. So to be on that roll call alongside those folks that I've always held in such great respect and awe is both amazing and humbling. I truly have to pinch myself. So thank you again. Then, of course, the cherry on the cake, to be sitting here talking about Rural Studio with two folks I love and respect and who happen to be two of the great contemporary American architects. What an incredible testament to the great idea Rural Studio founders Sambo Mockbey and D.K. Ruth had 30 years ago, and shows how, even despite my best efforts, good ideas really can prevail, right? Thank goodness that the coronavirus has limited my awkwardness to sitting here in front of Zoom and not having to stand up in a penguin suit in a fancy hall in New York City. Though, as you heard, Rosalie has said we can have a party. And so just so you all know, all the Alabama folks want to come and party in the Big Apple. So be prepared, y'all. It does feel very awkward that one person should be lauded tonight. Rural Studio is a place of many, many voices and contributors. It's wonderfully messy effort that I ultimately hope benefits everyone. My role is simply to give folks opportunities. But of course, I'd be amiss not to acknowledge the incredible community of folks that make all this Rural Studio work happen. So here goes, y'all. First, I'm going to accept this gong on behalf of Auburn University, who started supporting this form of education when nobody else was doing this kind of place-based hands-on learning. I'll accept on behalf of the College of Architecture, Design and Construction, and I'm going to give a shout out to my great boss, Dean Vinnie Nathan. Vinnie! I'll also accept on behalf of the School of Architecture and give another shout out to my other great boss, Department Head Christian Dagg. Christian, thank you. It's always good to thank your bosses, and vociferously, of course. They have both consistently and heroically had my back when faced with complaints about my flowery language. Imagine that. Huh? Seriously though, Rural Studio would not happen without their good sense, vision, and of course their ability to run interference for us. And I also accept on behalf of Rural Studio Associate Director, Rusty Smith, who so often helps me not put my foot in my mouth and to consider things thoroughly and thoughtfully. It's great to have such a co-conspirator, an ear to bend, and he's the real engine behind the 20K front porch. And thank you to our research and development partners, Fannie Mae, Wells Fargo, and USDA Rural Development for showing incredible faith in our housing affordability work. I'm getting to the end, honestly. I accept on behalf of our donors and supporters who have helped keep the doors open all these years. For much of the bricks and mortar you saw tonight, I say a big thank you. 3 family foundations in particular have stuck with us through thick and thin. Andrea Dean, Bob and Winnie Rollerson, Christine Pellenz, and Bill Lavin. They are lovely folks and all are very much part of the Rural Studio family. I also accept on behalf of our fantastic and incredibly committed faculty and staff at Rural Studio, most of whom frankly should have been committed years ago. They're a group of folks for whom Rural Studio is more than just work. I love you all. I accept on behalf, of course, on behalf of the students, of course, our lifeblood, who bring energy and enthusiasm, hard work, take the opportunities offered, and who all constantly never cease to amaze and surprise us. And I accept on behalf of the plethora of generous consultants from across the planet, most often pro bono, who advise these students every day, just to simply help make the projects better than we can dream. And then finally and above all, I accept on behalf of our beloved Hale County and Newbern, Alabama. Thank you for welcoming and accepting us as your neighbors for the last 30 years and allowing us to call Hale County home. To end, I have 2 special thank yous. First to my family, Eleanor and Christina, for embracing and supporting this often grumpy bugger's love affair with Hale County and ultimately falling in love with the place and the studio. And thank you so much to Paul and Rosalie at the League, such great leaders in a great organization showing tireless commitment, imagination, and energy. It's been a huge pleasure to get to know you, and I'm so glad that you had a chance to visit Hale County, and I hope you'll come again, please. And of course, to Billie and Marlon, who I love dearly and am privileged to call my friends. Thank you for being here tonight to share my awkwardness. Finally, one last thing, and then I promise I'll shut up. At a moment in time when this sickness is just exacerbating the social divide in this country, I do hope that the underlying message of the award is heard, that place really does matter, and that everyone, both rich and poor, deserves the benefit of good, dignified, equitable design, whether they can afford it or not. Thank you again. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Andrew. So it's been an honor to be able to be part of this event, celebrating what you and what Rural Studio have achieved. And actually, we look forward with optimism to what you do moving forward. It should be said that we are in one of the most difficult times in our history, global pandemic, cancerous racism, and entrenched inequality, and the dire impacts and prospects of climate change. Yet through sustained ideas and action, the courage to take on these tough problems, Rural Studio offers specific models for a better way of doing things, a better community.
And I just want to say, Andrew, thank you so much. It's been an incredible experience to be able to work with you and to get to know Rural Studio better through working on this award. Truly a fantastic experience. On behalf of the League and everybody joining us from around the United States and actually from around the world, our heartfelt thanks and congratulations. May we all be inspired and moved to beneficial and consequential action by your example. Thank you so much. And good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Rural Studio.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers. In everybody.
Here, here.
Here, here.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.